Your Golden State Warriors are back up to the fifth seed in the NBA's Western Conference standings. Man, that feels good to say. Welcome to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after the Warriors get a big, massive 134-125 victory over the Memphis Grizzlies at FedExForum on Tuesday. Steph and goddamn Curry. Man, like when you need this man to deliver, he comes through 52 points, 12 threes. Not only that, he had like 5 steals. What do you have? 10 rebounds, 8 assists in this game. Like the numbers were simply absurd, and the Warriors get the job done. It was tight. It was tight. As good as Steph was, the Grizzlies had a 4-point lead there with about 3.5 minutes remaining, but the Warriors make the big plays down the stretch and come away with the victory. Let me know what your thoughts on the game were. Look, you got to start with Steph. You simply have to. He was mind-bogglingly good. 32 points in the first half, 8 threes. I was a little bit concerned as good as it was to watch Steph just absolutely go off in this game, and particularly in the first half. I was a little bit concerned about the fact that the Warriors were still only up 8 at the end of the first half, despite Steph being as good as he was. And so I was nervous the entire game. I'll be totally honest with you. This is probably the most nervous I've been before and during a game for the entire season, just because of the enormity of the game and what the implications were depending on a win or a loss. Like the Warriors get the win, they're up to the 5th seed in the West, but it's easy to remember if they'd lost this game, which looked like it could have happened there again with 3.5 minutes remaining, they're down 4. They could have easily found themselves, back down to 8th if other results kind of went against them here in the next couple of days. So the difference between a win and a loss in this game was huge, and I think everyone felt that. Steve just said in his post-game press conference that this was like a real playoff atmosphere, and it just felt like that from the opening tip. And I think it felt like that mostly because the stars, they came to play, right? Not only Steph, but Jimmy and Draymond. And I kind of want to get into Jimmy a little bit here as well. Ja Morant was huge for Memphis. I think Golden State really missed the perimeter defense of Gary Payne, and even like JK as another, athletic guy to be able to throw a jar. I thought the Warriors did a pretty good job on Jar like later in the game in the 4th, and Memphis, they kind of struggled a bit offensively in the final period. And I think the Warriors did a reasonable job of kind of funneling Jar, into Draymond and into some size on the interior and making things a little bit more difficult. So credit to them there, but Jar was fantastic. Jaren Jackson had his moments, but was in some foul trouble. Desmond Bane had some moments, but ultimately, I think the Warriors, their 3 veteran stars, they came to play in a manner that, clearly they saw how big this game was and what it meant for their season. And they just came out and played in a manner that, really that they refused to lose. Like it was simple as that. And Memphis, credit to them on the second night of a back-to-back. They played really well. But again, the Warriors just made the big plays when it mattered most. And the younger players didn't necessarily come along for the ride. It was really the main core guys of Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond, which is what we're going to see in the playoffs. But at times, the young guys are going to have to make some big plays. And we saw that. Even though, Pods didn't have a great game, Moses didn't have a great game, but they came up with a couple of massive plays. First, the Warriors up 3, missed 3. Pods soars in over Jar, gets the tip in off the offensive rebound, extends the lead to 5 with just over a minute to go. That's a massive play. And then the next possession, time dwindling down, Draymond finds Moses in the corner for the dagger 3, nails it, puts the Warriors up 8. The game's basically over from that point with just over 30 seconds left. So credit to those guys for continuing with it. It's very easy as a young player, big game, to kind of be out of the loop and not necessarily playing overly well and get down on confidence and therefore, not be ready when the big plays are ready to be made. But credit to those guys for doing so, no doubt about that. Just before I get into your comments, I know, everyone's going to talk about Steph. He deserves the headlines. It's just an unbelievable performance. It looked like for a second there, kind of in the early second half, he obviously had 8 threes in the first half. It looked like he was on track to potentially break Clay's 14 made threes individual game record. Obviously didn't get to that. Fell too shy with 12. But I really kind of want to focus on Jimmy because there's been a little bit of talk recently about Jimmy and his inability to take over games, and therefore perhaps this idea that he can't just flick a switch and become playoff Jimmy like we've kind of expected that he will when the games matter more. And then Righty, guys. I think I was just speaking there for probably 5 minutes when it wasn't connected. So I apologize for that. Someone just said that probably a power outage in Australia. Not quite, but disappointing nonetheless. So I apologize to you guys for that. I think we're back up and going now. I'm going to get straight into your guys' comments. Pick it up here. I just spoke for 3 or 4 minutes about Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and all that, but we'll get back into it. Knox says game was stressful as hell. It absolutely was. I think just the implications of the game all around, like from a fan perspective, like the thoughts of this team really like these next few games, like can almost determine the Warriors' championship credentials and their championship chances because you've got a situation where it's so tightly packed in the Western Conference that, again, you move up to fifth with a win here, but you could have easily fallen. You would have fallen to seventh or eighth. We'll obviously see what happens. Minnesota are playing Denver at the moment. Denver are up one. Is that halftime now, I think? Yeah, halftime, Denver up one. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But there's just like every game. This is playoff basketball. Like this is every game means a lot. And when you get to this point of the season, this is what the elite guys play for, and it's why it's so good to see Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond step up because they know the importance of this game, or they knew the importance of this game, and they came out and played as such. So this is really playoff level basketball. We're here now, basically. We're 7 games left in the regular season. The Warriors just need to keep on winning, with obviously the Lakers to come on Thursday, and then a back-to-back with the Nuggets and the Rockets, which is going to be huge. And it's not only about, and we've written about this a little bit for Blue Man Hoop. It's not just about the playoff seedings and where you are in the standings, but I think it's also for the Warriors. You're playing 4 games here. Now, I know Memphis are now behind Golden State in the standings, but you're playing 4 games here where you've got 4 teams above you in the Western Conference standings and teams that are going to be there and potential playoff opponents and teams trying to get through to the West Finals and through to the NBA Finals. And I think these 4 games coming up here, obviously Memphis, Lakers, Nuggets, Rockets, it's not just about the standings and winning from that aspect. I've just disconnected again here, I think. Sorry, I've just reconnected again. This is getting super frustrating. I don't know if it's my internet, what it is, but it's very annoying. Thenex says Steph is a superstar, but he continually gets mauled every game. The refs don't blow the whistle. Yeah, it was funny how the post game interview there with Fitz and Buki and Steph on the sidelines. I think Kalena said something like, you could have gone 16 to 16 from the free throw line, not 8 of 8. Yeah, it's frustrating. The Warriors kind of had to battle through some pretty questionable refereeing decisions. It's what happens on the road sometimes. It's unfortunate. It's a pretty regular thing with Steph. But anyway, I don't want to get too negative in a performance like this. It was so positive, and the Warriors ended up winning. Thenex says 100% on free throws. The big things to me from a team standpoint, obviously we can look at the individual stuff with Steph, Jimmy, and Dre, but the big thing from a team standpoint, you've got to remember Memphis actually shot better from the field and 3-point range in this game, right? But the big thing for the Warriors, they're, as you say, 28 of 28 from the free throw line. This is a team that before Jimmy Butler was the worst free throw shooting team in the league, took the third least amount of threes as well before Jimmy Butler. Now they're literally like one of the best free throw shooting teams. And to go 28 of 28, which was really pivotal in a close-ish game like this, that's massive. You've also got the fact they turned the ball over 5 less times, just 11 turnovers for the game. And also, you saw Memphis go big with Jaren Jackson and Zach Edey at the 4-5. The Warriors going super small with that usual starting lineup now with Steph, Pods, Jimmy, Moody, and Dre. And you have a situation where the Warriors still win the offensive rebounding battle 15-8 or 15-7, I think it was. Just double checking here. 15 offensive rebounds to 8. So 7 more offensive rebounds. That plays a big factor as well. And it's kind of, goes against the size and what you would think with Memphis throwing out some genuinely big guys like obviously Edey at the head of that, and Jaren Jackson and even Aldama coming off the bench is like 7 foot. So they've got some big guys, and the fact the Warriors were able to get to the free throw line relentlessly and also out-rebound Memphis was obviously a key factor in this game. Robbie says Jimmy played great. Moody fits in so well with the vets. Absolutely. Biscondo says Steph is so mentally tough. He was getting mauled as usual, but he managed just to keep his composure. It's impressive to see. Even the composure stuff, like what about at the end there where the Warriors take a timeout? Steph goes to shoot the three. Bane like kind of hacks him to make sure he doesn't shoot the three. And Steph like got into him like rather quick. He's like, "What are you doing?" And then Steph just like walked himself quickly over to the bench, and he's like, "Okay." Where I think they were up 8 at that point. He was basically or up 5, whatever it was, and he was basically like, "Okay, I'm not going to put myself. I'm pissed off that Desmond Bane just did that, and I'm going to have a minor crack at him, but I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I could, really hurt the team with, a technical foul or something could happen that could." Put into trouble, the result of this game, which is now in a pretty good keeping from our perspective. And I just thought like that's another sign of his composure. The fact that he just had a minor crack at Desmond Bane and then thought, no, I'm not going to let this escalate into anything significant. I'm just going to walk over the bench, just going to walk over and sit down. Right. And that's just going to allow the situation to peter out into absolutely nothing. And then you had the Jar and Buddy Hield stuff at the end there, which was bizarre. And I don't think we need to comment too much on that. That was weird, but whatever. Biscano also says, enjoy while we can, folks. Steph is a one in a lifetime kind of player. Absolutely. Says basketball will never be the same when he retires, for sure. Like, I mean, you could argue, like, I think, will there ever be a shooter that comes along like Steph? Maybe, maybe into like the next 100 years, maybe there is. But in terms of the impact on the game, I don't think there'll be like there's never going to be anyone like Steph from a shooting perspective. So you could come out and you could have the exact same career as Steph Curry has had. There could be some guy who's not even born yet, whatever, comes out, has the exact same career as Steph, but he's not going to have anywhere near the same impact on the game as Steph's had. And that's what makes him one in a lifetime. Like you cannot replicate the impact that he's had on basketball with what he's done. Like that is impossible to replicate again. And that's why, as Biscondo says, once in a lifetime kind of player. Jackson says the team out rebounded the much taller Grizzlies by 6. Great hustle on their part, especially on the offensive glass. Absolutely. Biscondo says game was a good test. Playoff atmosphere. For sure. Dendex says if we get the Lakers in the playoffs, ref will be worse than today. We'll wait and see. That's what it's matching up with at the moment. The 4-seed Lakers, the 5-seed Warriors, which would the NBA love that or hate that? I feel like they'd love that, but later on in the playoffs, like if it was, Western Conference Finals Warriors, Lakers, I feel like they'd be a little bit disappointed that it comes so early, but man, that would be a huge start to the playoffs if it was Lakers Warriors, no doubt about that. Rutherford says if Steph gets Shea type calls, then we might have seen a 10-year reigning champion. the league won't let that happen. Biscondo says I was nervous the entire game. Dennis says we are 18-5. I can't believe it. 20-5. I think when are we 19-5 since Jimmy's arrival? I think that's what might be. Anyway, MUYFAE space as well. What's up? Well, that was stressful. Robbie says, I think a game like this shows we need a player like JK in case some plays fall apart. However, he still needs some major defensive improvements. Yeah, I think there were times throughout the game, and I know Fitz said this pretty regularly on the broadcast, like, can the Warriors get a third guy going here offensively? They've got Steph, they've got Jimmy, who's the third guy, and they just didn't really get that, and they didn't have to because, Steph and Jimmy combined for 79 points in this game. If you're looking at Draymond was the third leading scorer at 13. Moses had 10. Pods had 8. Buddy had 8. Buddy had a couple of we had that big 3 fourth quarter. He also got to the free throw line at the end of a possession. Also had a few mistakes. Post had 9, but was 3 of 10. 3 of 9 from deep. He continues to chuck them up. Loon had that corner 3 at the end of the shot clock, which was wild. So, obviously missing JK and GP2 in this game, which hurts the rotation a little bit. And yeah, I think there are going to be games where you do need Kuminga's, scoring to try and supplement Jimmy and Steph a little bit. Whether he can also fit in to play alongside those guys is also going to be a huge talking point, as it has been and will continue to be over these final 7 regular season games. Gamer FTP or FTP says Steph, Jimmy, Dre, great. What we expected from the vets, but I'll give flowers to Pods for that putback dunk. Sees momentum for us and Moody blocking the crap out of Morant and then the dagger 3. Great stuff. Rutherford says Pods with that putback is insane. Nobody expected it from his size. Rutherford says Buddy return gun expression to Jari is hilarious. Does the league have to step in with that? That was some bizarre stuff. Logan says the 2 times. Yes, I apologize for the ongoing internet issues. Logan says that's 2 times this season here in Memphis and Orlando. I thought Steph would at least tie Clay for most threes in a game. Yeah, well, he had 8, and then what did he have? He had 11 entering the 4th, didn't he? He only made 1 3 in the final period, I think. Valaris says Jar was making gun gestures at the Warriors bench and didn't get a tech. Rockets have a hard rest of schedule. They could drop potentially, Logan says. Let's have a look at the updated standings. The Rockets have been very good recently, and it's kind of making me change my feel on, like, would you actually want to play them in the first round of the playoffs? I still think I would, but what are they? I'm just having a look at their recent. They're 8-2 in their last 10, so they've been excellent. Obviously, the Thunder well out on top. The Rockets are a game and a half ahead of the Nuggets. The Nuggets are a game ahead of the Lakers. The Lakers are 2 games ahead of the Warriors. The Warriors are half a game ahead now of the Grizzlies. Well, basically, the best way to put it is the Warriors are a loss in front of the Grizzlies, Timberwolves, and Clippers. Okay, that's the best way to put it. We'll see what happens with the Timberwolves and Nuggets now over the rest of this game, 53-52 at halftime. But that is the 8. The Warriors aren't going to drop further than 8th. Obviously, you got the Mavericks and the Kings. I don't know. Like, I'm pretty confident the Warriors will be making the playoffs. I guess the one issue is going to be like, okay, if you lose a 7-8 playing game and then you have a one-off elimination against the Mavs or the Kings or something like that, then, could Anthony Davis go off for 40 and 15 and win a game single-handedly? Maybe. Could DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine go for 35 and win a one-off game? Maybe. Like, it's unlikely, but I think that might scare you a little bit, and that's exactly why you don't want to be involved in the play-in tournament. I think the best thing about this is that, now that you're past Memphis, it gives you that little bit of extra wiggle room. Like, I think we were looking at it previously as, the Warriors have to finish ahead of Minnesota and LA. Well, now they can actually finish behind one of those teams, but as long as they finish above the other and above Memphis, they still finish in the top 6. So I feel like that just gives you a little bit more wiggle room in terms of, getting that top 6 spot and not having to be involved in the play-in tournament. Zerkmark says, crazy good win. AES says, I would like to have Wiggins back in exchange for Kuminga next season. It's not the first time that's been mentioned in a post-game live or on this podcast. Plenty of time to talk about that in the offseason. Very unlikely. And, at this point, I'm still, fully focused on, obviously, the remainder of this season and what the Warriors can potentially do. And then, obviously, we're going to have a huge offseason to discuss Kuminga and everything else that could potentially happen. Robbie says, rather play the Lakers than the Nuggets. I don't know. I'm pretty 50-50. I'm pretty 50-50. Because part of me thinks I don't want a bar of Luka and LeBron and that combination. Like, that does scare me. I'll be blatantly honest. But at the same time, like, Nikola Jokic also scares me. And the fact that the Grizzlies have won like 9 straight regular season games and had the wood over the Warriors, that scares the crap out of me. So I wouldn't like to play either, and I'm not really sure who I would prefer. Maybe I'd prefer Denver, but I don't know. I really don't know. I'd rather play neither, but it looks like you might get one of them if you finish in the top 6 because you're either finishing 5th and potentially playing the Lakers, or you're finishing 6th and potentially playing the Nuggets. So I don't know. I'm not really sure what the best case scenario for the Warriors here is, because we can always, we can keep saying, can they finish 7th and play the Rockets? Okay, well, that might be your preferable matchup. But again, you don't want to flirt with the play-in tournament. The Warriors are 0-3 in play-in tournament games, right? You don't want to deal with that. you don't want to have to go through that. Obviously, playing extra games and not getting the rest. So I don't know. It's still a case, I think, of just taking things one game at a time, and where things end up at the end of the season, that's where things end up. Like, and you just got to try and keep building momentum and trying to keep winning. Kevin McLean with a comment on Kuminga suggesting that they would have lost had he played this game. I don't know. Like, I don't really like that. Like, we just won. Yes, Kuminga didn't play. Do we really have to take the negative approach of suggesting stuff like that in a game where he didn't play? I don't know. I think you have an argument, right? But I just don't like talking about it. Berserk Monk says, Steph took this game personal, came out super aggressive in the start of the game, while none of that standing in the corner and letting others warm up. Absolutely true. He was red hot first quarter. What do you have, 14 or 16 or something like that? Didn't miss a shot from the field. Was absolutely unbelievable. Probably, some of this stuff, against particular, defensive matchups as well, where Jalen Wells got a lot of credit after that game in December where he kept Steph without a made field goal. And everyone's like, oh, look at Jalen Wells, second round pick out of the draft, locking up Steph Curry. And I'm sure Steph would have looked at that and thought, man, I just had a crap game. Like, don't give this guy too much credit. And I think he probably took that a bit personally. And we saw what happened in this one. B-Mus says, Lakers want it more better to play the Nuggets in known quantity. Rutherford says 5-8 seed is so close, just one or two losses can shift it totally. Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe I was off stream when I was talking about the fact that not only do you want to keep winning for the standing perspective, but I think for just building momentum and building confidence and believing that you can actually do something in the playoffs, I think that's almost just as important as obviously the win-loss aspect of it, which is crucial in the standings. Valaris says, Jimmy has a fixed time to check out the game in the first quarter. That's a 7-minute mark, and he's usually not back until the second after that. He left the 6-minute mark and was back by the 4th-minute mark tonight. I feel like with some of the rotation calls, and I guess this is part of a shortened rotation, no GP2, no Kuminga, who'd obviously play if they were available. I feel like this, again, felt like a playoff game with some of the Steve Kerr decision-making in terms of Steph, Jimmy, Draymond all playing reasonably big minutes. And Jimmy, particularly, he had that, feels like he's a bit of an Iron Man, feels like he could play a lot more than what he usually does. And we saw him go down with that ankle turn, which is going to be a bit of a concern maybe in how that heals up tomorrow. For example, we know, ankle issues and stuff like that can feel worse the next day than what they do at the time. And that was an issue when he turned his ankle on Edie and was down for a little bit and limping significantly after. But then he came out in the fourth quarter and had 10 points and looked fine. So, you could feel like in this game that Steve, I think you could just feel how much everyone wanted to win the game. And you should think that in every game, right? But there are some games that mean more than others. And this game meant more than perhaps every other game that's come before them this season. And I think you could feel that between all the key guys. Steve as coach, Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, they just really desperately wanted this game. Berserk Monk says, we don't want to actually face the Lakers. They have 3 foul grifters at least against the Nuggets. You can hack Jokic all day and you'll barely get any calls. Might be more frustrating to come up against the Lakers. You might be right on that. Rutherford said Warriors versus Lakers plus the refs is scary because the league won't want Steph makes 5 rings before they're king. Berserkman says if anyone breathes in Austin Reeves' hair moves, he gets free throws. Robbie says, why all the JK hate? I get it. It has been a rough transition, but I feel like he's never been the main reason we lost the game. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. He's just such a divisive player. Like, he's so divisive. It's, you got half the fan base who loves him and wants him to succeed and wants him, believes he can still be an all-star level player. And then the other half who are kind of totally out on it. And I think I'm still somewhere in the middle. Like, I can see both sides of the equation. Some of the numbers since his return are pretty hard to deny, but I think it's also worth mentioning that, hey, he deserves a little bit of time to try and regain, his footing in this team and particularly reintegrate with, this new iteration of the team with Jimmy Butler and Quentin Post and that kind of thing. There's some defensive stuff with him. There's some shot selection stuff with him. There's some ball movement stuff with him. There's plenty of different factors that come into what we think of Jonathan Kuminga, and that's why I think it can be so divisive. Then you've got the free agency stuff coming up and what, he could be paid in the off season. Like, there's just so many different things. And even in a game that he doesn't play, the outcome of the game and what we saw, a lot of it is still. All right, I'm going to finish it up in a minute. This is going to be my last crack. The internet's just hating me. I don't know why. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, whatever. A few more comments to finish off. Robbie says, what about when he averaged 25 from 10 games? I get criticism, but it's just hate for a player that has given us solid minutes. That's in regards to Kuminga and before his injury, which was obviously an impressive stint. And unfortunately, that injury came at a really bad time. And then now since then, it's obviously a different team and he hasn't quite been able to fit. But again, I don't want to speak too much about JK following a win. In a win in which he didn't play. Jackson says Jimmy has pretty good stats in his last 5 games against the Lakers with Miami, 23, 6-6. Let's hope for another big performance. I'm looking forward to some more like Jimmy takeover stuff. And I don't think he didn't necessarily take over this game, but the stats would suggest that in a quarter where the teams, struggled for quite a period offensively, the fact he had 10 fourth quarter points, most of it was really at the free throw line. That was super important. Valario says, bottom line is the West is hard. If you want to be a legit champion, you just beat whoever is in front of you. If matchups scare you, they're not legit contenders. Yeah, that's facts. Berserk Monk says, in principle, of course, that makes sense, but realistically, matchups heavily matter unless you're just one of the greatest teams assembled where you can just whoop anyone. 2017 Warriors. Yeah. Yeah, you can't be scared of anyone. You are always going to have your preferences on who you play or who you don't play in particular matchups. Absolutely. I just think it's difficult for the Warriors. They know, right? They know more than anyone how dangerous the play-in tournament can be. And therefore, I think that's got to override everything. Avoiding that's got to override the potential of having to play the Nuggets or the Lakers in the first round. I think you've just got to say to yourself, if that's how it works out, we finish 5th or 6th and have to play one of those teams, that's just what happens. I think if you start getting fancy and trying to manipulate it to get to a point where, we get to finish 7th. Yeah, we have to play a play-in tournament game. Hopefully we win that one. We finish 7th to play the Rockets. It just gets too tricky for me. Brody says, get Jar out of the league who's pulling the trigger at the Warriors bench. He has not changed since the suspension. Yeah, that was... I don't know. No comment from me. This is coming from a guy, just a personal story. I went up to Launceston, which is a couple of hours away from Hobart on the weekend, and I saw a carjacking in front of my very eyes, and it was bizarre. It's the first time I've ever seen it. And I was stunned. I was like on the other side of the road at the traffic lights, and I was walking with my cousin, and then we saw these 2 women get in a fight, and I was like, okay, this is weird. And they were, it wasn't much of a fight. They were just throwing hands a little bit. And then they kind of separated. And then one of them went in a shop, but she left her keys evidently in the car. And the woman just walked. The other woman just walked 20 meters, got in the car. The other woman walked out or ran out, started yelling. The woman in the car locked the car. The woman whose car it was stood in front of the car to try and prevent her driving off. And she just drove off and nearly cleaned up the owner of the car. And very lucky I didn't witness a murder right in front of my eyes on Saturday. It was wild. And this all basically happened in the space that it took for the traffic lights to turn from red to green so we could walk across the road. Yeah, anyway, it was wild. Back to the basketball just to finish. Berserk Monk says, even last year's playoff race in the West, if Denver never faces Minnesota and T-Wolves instead face the Mavs, the T-Wolves would have been knocked out, and then Jokic versus the Mavs, anyone's game. Yep. I mean, you could have that in every postseason run. You could say, well, what if this happened? What if they played this team? What if they played that team? I don't know. FTW Clan says, everyone knows the basketball gods will punish you if you try to cheat the game and lose to avoid certain matchups. Very good point. Very good point. You don't want to be playing around with it. Anyway, I'm going to finish it up there. Thanks to those of you that have persisted through the stream. I apologize for the internet issues and the fact that we had to back out and come back in a few times. I apologize for that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. I'll be back on Thursday following the game against the Lakers. That's obviously going to be another massive one from a Golden State perspective. If you haven't followed me on X/Twitter at POK252, that's POK252 is where you can find me. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in. Thanks to those of you that are watching on the replay or listening via your podcast feed. Let's hope the Warriors can get a fourth. They've now won 3 in a row again. They can get a 4th straight win over the Lakers. And actually, as we've spoke about, they can kind of edge a little bit closer to the Lakers and potentially move ahead of them as well. Like, can the Warriors get home court advantage of the first round of the playoffs? That'd be wild. Anyway, what a performance today. Steph Curry, 52 points. Jimmy Butler's scoring high with 27. Massive performance. The Warriors get a 134-125 win